The 7-year ordeal of Colleen Stan, you probably heard her story, tragically known as the girl in the box.
Right, and it's a story where the physical constraints, which were, I mean, absolutely horrific,
Oh, horrific.
they almost pale in comparison to the psychological architecture that her captor built around her.
That's what we want to get into. So our mission for this deep dive, it's not just to recount a crime story.
No, absolutely not. We're here to extract the scientific blueprint. We want to examine the actual legal and psychological mechanisms that allowed Cameron and Janice Hooker to just systematically dismantle a person's will.
So we're connecting her experience, Stan's experience, directly to this forensic analysis of what you call human captivity experiences, or HEC.
Exactly. We're using the framework developed by experts like Dr. Reed Malloy and the psychologist Chris Hatcher, who actually testified at the trial.
The goal here is to really understand how psychological isolation can be engineered to be, well, more powerful than any physical lock or chain.
Precisely. Let's see how that control was first established.
It all started with what seemed like, a totally benign moment. The sources say that on May 19th, 1977, Colleen Stan, who was 20 at the time, was hitchhiking.
Right. She was going from Eugene, Oregon, down to a friend's birthday party in California.
And this is key. She was an experienced hitchhiker. She was cautious. She'd actually turned down a few other rides.
Which is so important. So why did she accept a ride from Cameron Hooker?
Because he was with his wife, Janice, and they had a baby in the car.
And there it is. The image of safety, a family. It's the perfect disguise. That feeling of confidence he created in her, that was the very first layer of manipulation.
And that feeling of safety lasted, what, maybe 30 minutes?
Barely. He pulls off the road near Red Bluff, California, says they're looking for caves or something.
Right, and Janice gets out with the baby, and that's when everything changes.
The whole scene just shifts to terror. Cameron is suddenly in the back seat with her knife to her throat.
That combination is just, it's a classic technique, isn't it?
It is. It's a foundational capture technique. First, you have the con, the nice, safe family, followed immediately by the surprise or blitz attack. It's designed to overwhelm.
So he binds her, he gags her, and then he places this homemade wooden box over her head.
And let's be clear, this wasn't just a sack. The sources describe it as a device specifically engineered for sensory deprivation. It cut off light, sound, even fresh air. It's engineered trauma from the very first minute.
And from that moment on, her physical environment becomes a psychological weapon. He takes her to their home, first chains her in a crate, and then builds that coffin-like box he stored under their waterbed.
And this is where we have to pivot from the narrative to the analysis. This brings us right to the definition of a human captivity experience.
Okay, so define that for us. What is an ACE?
Dr. Reed Malloy's work defines it as any situation where a person is subjected entirely to the control and will of another. And crucially, they surrender their power, their autonomy, and their independence.
And that's a huge spectrum, right? I mean, it could be something socially sanctioned, like joining the military or being incarcerated.
Exactly. Or it can be what we have here, the extreme criminal, illegitimate end of the spectrum, like kidnapping or slavery.
So within that, there are two legal concepts that seem really important to distinguish. Undue influence and coercion.
Yes. And knowing the difference is essential for this case. You can think of it this way. Coercion is the immediate force or threat.
The knife to her throat.
The knife to her throat. The act of locking her in the box.
Yep.
But undue influence, that's the long game. It's the sustained psychological pressure that overpowers free will over time by exploiting dependence, isolation, and manipulating fear.
So coercion got her in the house, but undue influence is what kept her there for 7 years.
Perfectly put. That's why when we analyze an HCE, we use this framework, the 5 Cs. Choice of victim, capture technique, control mechanisms, consequences, and conclusion. And for Cameron Hooker, those control mechanisms are where the true, terrifying genius of his plan lies.
Let's focus right there then, on the control. We've established the capture was a mix of con and blitz. Once she's inside, the physical isolation in that box is immediate and profound.
It was designed to destroy her cognitive equilibrium. For long stretches, especially between 81 and 84, she was in there for 23 hours a day.
23 hours.
Think about that. The sensory deprivation, the darkness, being unable to stand, having to use a bedpan with her feet, it's complete degradation.
And the sources mention that in 1978, Janice actually gave birth to their second child on the waterbed, right above Colleen in the box.
It's an unbelievable detail. It underscores the absolute humiliation. But as horrific as the physical box was, it was really just the delivery system for his main weapon.
Which was the psychological coercion.
Yes, centered around a completely fabricated reality.
The company.
The company. This powerful fictional underground organization that he just invented, he made her sign a slave contract from them.
But what makes a fake contract from a fake company so effective?
It's not the contract itself, it's the threat behind it. He told her every single day that if she ever tried to escape, the company had the resources to hunt her down, torture her, and, worst of all, harm her entire family.
So it's an invisible threat, a chain you can't see.
Exactly. An invisible chain is far more effective. It follows you everywhere. It maximizes her fear while minimizing his need to physically restrain her. That fear became her self-imposed prison.
And at the same time, he's stripping away her identity.
Total identity control. She was no longer Colleen, she was just Kay, and she had to call him Master.
I found the detail about the novel Story of O to be particularly disturbing. He was forcing her to model herself on a fictional character.
He was systematically replacing her sense of self with one designed for total compliance. And this level of control, it moves beyond simple coercion. During the trial, the forensic psychologist Chris Hatcher,
Right.
he testified that these methods fall on a continuum. They start with persuasion, move to coercion, and end up at what he called brainwashing, or what experts now often call thought reform. The goal is a total change in the victim's values.
So what's the line? What makes this brainwashing and not just, extreme abuse?
Brainwashing is a systematic process. Hatcher specifically pointed out that the techniques Hooker used, they mirrored methods used by Soviets and the Chinese to get false confessions.
So like extreme stress, isolation.
Extreme stress, isolation, denying food and sleep, random punishments, but also critically intermittent rewards or moments of leniency. The goal isn't just to get compliance, it's to make the victim actually internalize the captor's reality.
Which brings us to the most counterintuitive part of this whole case.
Yeah.
The periods where she seemed to be free.
The consequences phase, yes. This is what created what the media called the chorus of disbelief.
The sources say she was allowed to work outside the home as a maid. She could go jogging. She even visited her family by herself in 1981.
And that's the question everyone asks. The defense certainly did. If she had a phone, if she saw her family, why didn't she run? They argued she was a willing partner.
It seems baffling. What is the psychological explanation for not taking that open door?
By that point, the control was entirely internal. She was a textbook case of learned helplessness.
Meaning she'd been conditioned to believe escape was just impossible.
Exactly. The perpetrator doesn't need to be physically present if, over years, he has systematically taught you that any resistance will lead to a punishment far worse than compliance. The fear of the company coming after her family was real to her.
So the fear of the invisible was stronger than the promise of freedom.
Absolutely. And you also have a state called frozen fright. It's a physiological response to chronic terror where the victim becomes emotionally numb, detached.
So they respond with passivity.
With compliance, it's a survival mechanism. Non-resistance makes you seem less of a threat. Her silence wasn't willingness, it was a symptom of profound, sustained trauma. And Hatcher's testimony was what helped the court understand that.
So the law literally had to be taught that the cage was invisible.
That's a perfect way of putting it.
And the end of this ordeal, it didn't come from an outside rescue. It came from a crack inside the captor's world. Specifically, from Janice Hooker.
Janice's role is just incredibly complex. She was an accomplice, yes, but she was also a victim of Cameron's sadism and brainwashing. He called her a whore, he tortured her. Her compliance was also rooted in fear.
And the turning point was his plan to make Colleen his second wife.
Yes. That's what seemed to finally break Janice's own conditioning. She went to Stan and confessed that the central terror, the company, was a complete lie.
Even then, she kind of waffled a bit, didn't she? Saying maybe a lesser organization existed.
She did, but the main threat was gone. And that was enough.
That one crack was enough. Colleen left in August 1984. She just caught a bus home. But the psychological control wasn't immediately broken.
No, and this is another crucial detail. In the months after she got home, she kept calling Cameron. Janice had asked her to, hoping he might reform. And Colleen, still deeply conditioned, did what she was told. She was physically free, but she hadn't fully escaped that master-slave dynamic.
It took Janice another 3 months to finally go to the police.
In November 1984, she confessed to everything, including the 1976 kidnapping and murder of another young woman, Marie Elizabeth Spanhack.
But they couldn't charge him for that murder, right?
No, they never found the body, so there was no physical proof. The trial had to focus entirely on the Colleen Stan case.
With Janice testifying against him in exchange for full immunity.
And her testimony, combined with Dr. Hatcher's expert analysis of coercive control, was what secured the conviction. Cameron Hooker was sentenced in 1985 to 104 years in prison.
Which brings us pretty much to today. This judicial process is still ongoing.
It is. He was denied parole in 2015, but he's now facing a jury trial set for January of 2026. This isn't about the original crime, though.
Right, this is to determine if he should be classified as a sexually violent predator in SVP.
Exactly. If he is, he could be committed indefinitely to a mental facility, which would make him ineligible for any future parole.
So this deep dive really has taken us from a shocking headline to a structured analysis of control. The physical box was a tool, but the real prison was psychological.
And that's the key takeaway. Understanding this continuum of captivity, the coercion, the isolation, the manipulation is so vital for victimology. It helps you recognize these same mechanisms in other contexts.
Like domestic abuse or cults.
Exactly. Cults, sex trafficking, involuntary servitude, the invisible chain is almost always the strongest one. It helps us see past a victim's apparent compliance and understand their survival response.
Which leaves us with a final thought. The most shocking part of Colleen Stan's 7 years might not be the box itself, but the fact that she had opportunities to escape. A phone, neighbors, time alone. Yet her fear, which was so carefully manufactured by her captor, was a cage strong enough to hold her. So what does it say about the human mind that a belief can be a more effective prison than steel and wood?
If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe for more content like this.